Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to have you here today. Today's presentation is brought to you by Continuous Learning Development. We're going to explore some valuable insights together. Over the next few minutes, we'll cover the key aspects of our topic, so let's get started and make this session engaging and informative. Let's take a closer look at the general theory of Islamic law. At its core, it revolves around the value system, which shapes how Islamic law is understood and applied. Within this framework, we have different theories that help us interpret the law. The normative theory focuses on what should be, establishing standards and principles, while the conceptual theory deals with understanding the core ideas behind these principles. Now, key concepts in Islamic law include din, which means religion, and nafs, referring to life. The family system is represented by nasl, and the role of the intellect is captured by aql. Mal stands for property, which is protected and regulated by the law. Hukm refers to laws and rules that govern behavior, while mahkam fi are the rights that individuals have, and mahkam, alay are the persons who are subject to these rights and obligations. Fiqh is essentially the body of concepts and jurisprudence that develop from these principles. Turning to how Islamic law is formed, the theory of ijtihad explains how scholars convert these foundational principles into actual laws. Similarly, the theory of takrij and qada outlines the methodology used to derive legal rulings from primary sources. Speaking of sources, the primary ones are the Quran and Sunnah, which provide the foundation for all legal reasoning. Lastly, we explore the conditions of taklif, which is the legal responsibility, and siyasa sharia, the Islamic public policy approach. Understanding these key points helps us see how Islamic law is both rooted in divine sources and adaptable through scholarly reasoning. Let's take a closer look at some of the secondary sources we use in Islamic law, specifically qiyas, which means analogy, and ijma, or consensus. These are important because they help us understand how legal rulings are derived beyond the primary texts. Now, when we talk about the legal structure of these evidences, or adala, we often refer to what's called dalil kulli or dalil amali. This essentially means a general evidence or a broad principle. For example, consider the verse from the Quran that states, "All sales are permitted except those bearing riba." This isn't specifying individual transactions, but instead, it establishes a general rule that applies broadly. This kind of evidence sets a principle that guides our understanding of similar cases, even if each case isn't explicitly detailed in the text. So, in the context of Islamic law, these general principles form the foundation for applying legal rulings uniformly, ensuring consistency and fairness across different situations. This approach helps us connect specific texts to broader legal concepts, which is crucial for a comprehensive understanding of how Islamic law functions in various contexts. Let's take a closer look at dalil tafsili, which is a specific type of evidence, often translated as detailed proof. Essentially, this refers to a particular verse from the Quran or a specific sunnah that provides clear guidance on a matter. For example, consider the principle of al-Kharaj by al-Daman, meaning entitlement to profit is based on a corresponding liability for bearing loss. This principle is the foundation for many rules across various areas of Islamic law. In this context, it's interesting to note that while this principle can be seen as a true dalil kulli, meaning a general or universal proof, it also functions as a dalil tafsili because it's derived from a specific tradition or source. So the key takeaway here is that dalil tafsili is about detailed, specific evidence, whether from a single verse or a particular sunnah. That helps us understand broader legal principles in Islamic law. And understanding how these specific references underpin general rules is essential for a comprehensive grasp of our legal and religious framework. Let's begin by understanding some basic terms and distinctions. First, Sharia and fiqh. Sharia is essentially the law itself, the divine legal framework. Fiqh, on the other hand, is the knowledge or understanding of that law, what we often call jurisprudence. It's how scholars interpret and apply the divine law in real-life situations. Next, we have the terms mujtahid and faqih. Both refer to jurists, but they have slightly different connotations. A mujtahid is a jurist who derives legal rulings directly from specific evidence, such as the Quran and Hadith. They engage in independent reasoning, known as ijtihad, to arrive at legal rulings. The term faqih came to be used later for jurists who derive their knowledge from existing manuals of fiqh, which compile the opinions of mujtahids. So, a faqih relies on these texts to understand and apply the law. Finally, it's important to note that the law derived by the mujtahid becomes a source of law for the faqih. In other words, the faqih's understanding and teachings are based on the rulings established through ijtihad by mujtahids. This connection highlights the progression from direct interpretation to the codification and study of Islamic law. This distinction helps us see how Islamic jurisprudence has developed, balancing original divine sources with scholarly interpretation. Let's talk about ijtihad and taqlid. Ijtihad is the activity carried out by a mujtahid, someone who uses all available sources to derive Islamic law. Think of it as a careful, scholarly effort to interpret religious texts and principles. On the other hand, taqlid, in the legal sense, simply means following the opinion of another scholar or mujtahid. When there's a clear legal justification, taqlid becomes permissible, allowing followers to rely on established opinions without needing to rederive laws themselves. Now, moving on to the terms muqallid and faqih. A faqih is a person who isn't able to undertake independent ijtihad, usually because they lack the necessary qualifications or skills. So, technically, such a person is called a muqallid, someone who follows the opinion of a qualified mujtahid instead of making independent legal judgments. This distinction helps us understand how Islamic legal authority and followers are connected within the broader framework of jurisprudence. When we talk about usul al-fiqh, we're essentially breaking down a term into two parts, usul and fiqh. First, let's look at each of these words on their own. Fiqh, in its literal sense, means understanding or discernment. It's about grasping the deeper meanings behind Islamic laws and teachings. On the other hand, asl, which is translated as root or foundation, refers to the basic underlying principles that support and give structure to fiqh. So, when we combine these ideas, usul al-fiqh is about understanding the foundational principles that underpin Islamic jurisprudence. It's important because it helps us see how Islamic laws are derived and applied, connecting directly to our overall theme of understanding the core of Islamic legal sciences. Now, let's look at the definition of usul al-fiqh. Basically, we can describe it as the discipline that provides us with a deep understanding of the sources and principles used for interpretation and legal reasoning. This knowledge is essential because it helps the jurist, or Islamic legal scholar, to arrive at the legal rules of conduct that guide us in daily life. Moving on, it's important to understand the general meaning of the terms involved. Fiqh, for instance, is essentially the knowledge of the shari ahkam, or legal rules, which relate to conduct. These rules are derived from specific pieces of evidence, meaning they are based on foundational texts and sources. And then there's the term asl, which is used to refer to a general principle. Think of it as a broad rule or foundational idea that informs the specifics. Now, these general principles are of two main types. Some govern the law itself, setting out the rules and regulations, while others guide the process of interpretation, how we understand and apply those rules in different contexts. So, in summary, usul al-fiqh helps us understand how to derive and interpret Islamic law. It connects the sources, principles, and reasoning, ensuring that our legal rulings are rooted in sound methodology. This is a crucial part of understanding the overall framework of Islamic jurisprudence.